Welcome riders. In this video we're going to count down the top 30 coasters I've ridden the most since 2020 began. Kennywood Coaster has done a type of this video the last few years and I loved it so much I decided to do my own. Except I'm going to do mine spanning multiple years because why not? I have become a lot better at accumulating multiple rides since 2020 and I thought it'd be fun to cover multiple years back because I had multiple home parks over those years, and I think it'll be interesting to look back at this list in the future as I anticipate coasters from my home park, Six Flags Great America, will infiltrate the list, and because I'll visit the park a lot more than I have in recent years, and I did go ahead and I bought a gold all-season flash pass for this upcoming season, so excited to use that. Like Kennywood Coasters videos of this type, I'm not going to be reviewing the rides. Rather, I'm going to give a brief explanation as to why or how I got that many rides. And any tie breaks will go to the coaster I like more. Let's get into the list. It's a slight pain, pun intended, starting off the list with Corkscrew at Cedar Point with 10 rides. Cedar Point was my home park for the summer 2021, summer 2022, and fall 2022 while I worked at the park. I rarely spent an entire day in the park as a guest, often opting to go in before or after my shift. I tended to spend my off days at other parks, but when the park had above average lines and Corkscrew was a station wait, I didn't mind going and snagging a ride on it, or when I had limited time left because I had to be back in the office to start work, like in 15-20 minutes, I could often squeeze in one last ride on Corkscrew or Power Tower or Rougaru. So here's a picture of me when a Corkscrew valleyed, so yeah, that's cool. Shout out to Jack from maintenance. Coming in at number 29 is Jersey Devil Coaster at Six Flags Great Adventure with 10 rides. I visited the park for one full day during a summer weekday last year, and the park was absolutely dead. The longest line I waited for was 10 minutes for King Ka. Jersey Devil is only my third favorite coaster in the park, but I found it to be the easiest coaster to re-ride because of the moving station, and I was more inclined to get multiple rides because I had already gone through the hassle to put my phone in a locker. El Toro was rough and ripped my pants that day, and Nitro just has a much longer cycle time, so that's why Jersey Devil ended up with the most. Number 28 is Leviathan at Canada's Wonderland with 10 rides, again. I spent a day and a half at the park last summer, but all my rides were on the full day because I had Fastlane on that day, so I usually only waited 5 minutes for Fastlane while the standby queue was around 2 hours, pretty much like every ride in the park. So definitely get Fastlane if you plan on going to Canada's Wonderland. Number 27 is Phantom's Revenge at Kennywood with 11 rides. I've spent 3 partial days at the park in the last 2 years, and there's no special explanation for this one. It's simply the best coaster in the park that I want to ride the most. I waited anywhere from 0 minutes to 45 minutes for all my rides, and yes, I specifically picked the green Phantom picture. I do not like the purple. Number 26 is Maxx Force at Six Flags Great America with 11 rides. One of only 3 representatives from my home park, as I've only been to the park 8 times since 2020. Usually, I only ride this coaster once or twice a visit, or sometimes not even at all if it doesn't open. But there was one day last fall when the ride opened on time, and the single rider line was open. So I was able to snag 3 rides in the first hour that day and a couple more later in the day. And I usually use my membership skips on Maxx Force too, so I hardly ever wait in standby. Number 25 is Ravine Flyor 2 at Waldameer with 12 rides. This is almost a carbon copy of Phantom's Revenge explanation. I've spent the better part of 2 days at the park, and it's the only ride worth marathoning. Again, I've waited anywhere from 0 to 45 minutes for my rides. I will note, though, the line is usually below 15 minutes, but I visited on a holiday for my 2021 visit, so that's why I did some 45-minute waits. Number 24 is Montu-Busch Gardens Tampa Bay with 12 rides. All my rides came from 2 full days at the park a couple months ago. I did not wait more than 5 minutes for any of those rides. It's my favorite invert, so I was inclined to ride it many times. And again, I picked an older picture with the older paint scheme because it was better. Deal with it. Number 23 is Goliath at Six Flags Great America with 12 rides. This is basically the same reason as Maxx Force. I usually ride it 0 times, once, or twice, but one day this past year I was able to rope drop it, and I snagged 5 rides in the first hour thanks to some seat hoppings and virtually no line. The last Six Flags Great America coaster is coming in at number 22, Viper, with 13 rides. I actually really like this coaster. I have it ranked in my top 4 in the park, and some days I think it's number 3. Given I think highly of it, and it's always one of the shortest lines in the park, it's a no-brainer that it's my most ridden coaster in the park. Number 21 is Skyrush at Hersheypark with 13 rides. The lone representative from the world's sweetest place on earth is so intense it never has a line. And honestly, this number would be doubled or maybe even tripled if the restraints were any better. It's always a battle re-riding this coaster, even though it is one of the world's best. Number 20 is the Beast at Kings Island with 14 rides. This is the first of Kings Island's top 5 coasters that you will see. They can all be explained by the fact that Kings Island has nearly the best ride operations I've seen, and in all but 2 of my 10 days at the park, some of them partial, some of them full days, they were all summer weekdays, so all but 2. I would say my average wait time is 10 minutes for any ride in the park across all my visits. Kings Island's my favorite park, and I visited frequently when I worked at Cedar Point. I definitely rode the Beast more in 2022 than I did in 2021, as I really enjoyed the retrack that Gravity Group did. Number 19 is Gatekeeper at Cedar Point with 15 rides. I was honestly surprised that Gatekeeper was on this list, let alone comfortably in the middle. It's my least favorite B&M in the park, and don't forget that Gatekeeper was down for a few months in the summer of 2021. Fun fact, I was on the first public train when it reopened. Anyways, part of this can be explained by the fact that I often did early ride time in 2021 in the front of the park. I'd usually get 4 or 5 rides on some combination of Gatekeeper, Raptor, and Valravn. Number 18 is Mako at SeaWorld Orlando with 16 rides. I spent 10 days in Florida a few months ago, and I spent 3 days at the park for a couple hours each time. The first 2 times we went because the park was open the latest out of all the parks in the area. The last day we went before my flight because I wanted some last few rides on Mako, and there was never a line longer than 15 minutes. This number would be higher, but SeaWorld didn't allow for seat hopping or re-rides, so sad face. Number 17 is Storm Chaser at Kentucky Kingdom with 16 rides. I spent a total of 5 or 6 hours at the park between both my visits in the last 2 years. I feel like half the people that go to Kentucky Kingdom don't even know Storm Chaser exists. I've never seen it have a line, yet other rides at the park will have a decent line, so I'm not going to complain about it though. I will take an elite ride with no line any day of the week. Number 16 is Iron Gwazi at Busch Gardens Tampa Bay with, 16 rides. I mentioned I spent 2 days at the park, but Iron Gwazi was only open for one of those 2 days, so we were fortunate that it was running 2 trains and we never waited more than 15 minutes, but oftentimes we got on the next train. Number 15 is Millennium Force at Cedar Point with 19 rides. This is a ride I rode when others wanted to, more than riding it on my own. I'm not really crazy for this ride at all. I never rode it during early entry on my old terms, but I guess my friends dragged me on it enough to get this high of a placement. I think the best part of the ride is this picture I took of it. Number 14 is VelociCoaster at Universal's Islands of Adventure with 19 rides. Out of the 10 days I was in Florida, we went to Islands of Adventure for 8 of those days. One day I didn't ride VelociCoaster at all. 6 days we rode it once, twice, or 3 times. And the last day we were lucky enough to snag 10 rides. It was a really rainy and overcast day, and the crowds were really light, but credit's also due to the ride operators. I have to wear a medical device that I can't take off, so it's always a problem on rides with metal detectors like VelociCoaster. They had me take an alternative route that allowed me to skip about 15 minutes of the queue most times. Then there were a couple of ride operators that let us ride multiple times, not immediately, but we had to wait a few trains, but we were allowed to stay on the platform, which it saved us a lot of time not having to run all the way around after each ride, especially with the time it takes to lent rockers. Number 13 is Banshee at Kings Island with 21 rides. I enjoy this ride a lot, but it's really out of the way compared to the other top 4 coasters in the park. Banshee only has more rides than the Beast because I hardly ever re-ride the Beast, while I at least get 2 laps on Banshee every time I take the hike to the front of the park. Rest in peace, son of a beast. Number 12 is Fury 325 at Carowinds with 21 rides. This was only over the span of 2 half days. It did not have much of a line, and I only waited more than 10 minutes twice. They also allowed seat hopping, and that was really helpful as a single rider. Coming up next is the remaining Cedar Point B&M trio. Number 11 is Rougaru at 22 rides. This is pretty much the same explanation that I had for Corkscrew. The only difference is that I actually like this ride, thus more rides overall. Number 10 is Raptor at Cedar Point with 24 rides. I really enjoy this ride in 2021, but not as much as in 2022, so I definitely rode it more 2 years ago than last year. It was my top ride when I did early entry more often back in 2021. Number 9 is Valravn at Cedar Point with 25 rides. This one's interesting. I seldom rode this outside early entry. If I had to wait 75 minutes between Valravn and Maverick or Steel Vengeance, I'm taking those two over Valravn every day. So I made an effort to cut my wait time by only riding it during early entry. In 2021, I also had a crush on one of the ride operators, so that was the main reason I rode Valravn for more times than I'd like to admit. Number 8 is American Thunder at Six Flags St. Louis with 34 rides. The lone representative from my ex-home park is the best ride in the park besides Mr. Freeze. Did you know that I only have 2 rides on Mr. Freeze across 8 days at the park? That's part of the reason American Thunder is my only coaster from this park on this list, but on its own I find the coaster extremely re-rideable. More often than not, the line is a walk-on for me, and back when Holiday in the Park was a thing, rest in peace, I would just lap this thing all night long. Now it is time for the remaining Kings Island trio. Number 7 is Orion with 40 rides. I think the message is loud and clear that I hardly wait in lines at Kings Island. With the amount of time I've waited for Orion, I can barely recall the I'm a Score soundtrack or the pre-show. Number 6 is Diamondback at Kings Island with 44 rides. Being my favorite coaster in the park gives it the edge over Orion. It's also conveniently right next to the Brew House, which is my favorite place to eat, Tom and Chi, which is my 3rd favorite place to eat, a Coca-Cola Freestyle location, and my 2nd favorite coaster in the park, which is also next on this list. I never have to leave that little corner of the park, so I have everything I need right there. Number 5 is Mystic Timbers at Kings Island with 47 rides. Same explanation as Diamondback, but also add the fact that I made an extra effort to make this my all-time most ridden wooden coaster. I achieved that goal on my last visit to the park I had back in October. It ended up holding that title for a whopping 28 hours. Worth it if you ask me. Unrelated, but I just want to go on record and say that I love the shed, but whatever you do, don't go in the shed. Number 4 is my wild card from left field, Sandy's Blasting Bronco at Nickelodeon Universe, New Jersey with 50 rides. And for the record, that's 50 full cycles, both forwards and backwards, so 400 inversions, not 200. I'm probably going to make a separate video about this accomplishment at some point. It was one of the best moments I've had as an enthusiast. Long story short, we only had 5-6 hours in the park, rode everything, got a couple re-rides, determined Sandy's was the best ride there, and rode it over and over again. Shout out to my friend Nick for snagging this picture of me and Byron as we were getting our 50 rides. To finish off the list, we have Cedar Point's top 3 coasters. Number 3 is Steel Vengeance at 66 rides. I find this coaster overrated, but I cannot deny it's a legendary ride and it warrants all the efforts I made to ride it 66 times, obviously. I was able to get a huge push in my ride count by attending all 4 nights of Wild Frontier Nights. If you don't know what that is, it was a private event the park had, and the lines were pretty much non-existent, no one. I would chalk up a third of my total rides up to Wild Frontier Nights. Number 2 is Maverick at Cedar Point with 74 rides. Similar story to Steel Vengeance, but it gets the edge because Maverick is my favorite ride of all time, for now. So I made a better effort to ride it more often. Number 1 is Magnum XL-200 at Cedar Point with 99 rides. I rode Magnum once in 2015. When I returned in 2021, I rode it 17 times. Coming into 2022, I decided I wanted to make any coaster have 100 all-time rides because why not? I thought it would be cool. I decided to be Magnum XL-200 because, similar to Viper at Six Flags Great America, it's a really great coaster that either almost always has no line or it's one of the shortest in the park by a considerable amount. So in 2022, I got the remaining rides to hit 100 lifetime rides. It was a really rewarding journey and I'm really happy I did it. With all that said, that's all I got for this video. Like this video if you liked it and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss anything. Leave a comment if you'd liked. I'd love to interact with you guys. Push down, pull up, exit to the right. Hope you enjoyed the video and go have your greatest day yet. Choo choo bye.